On America Can We Talk, I talk about election integrity, border security, healthcare freedom, race relations, energy and tax policy, education policy, free speech and assembly, freedom of religion, and all other issues that touch on the God-given right of every American to life, liberty, and the pursuit of their version of happiness. Stay tuned.
You preach your tolerance, but lecture me. Is there no end to your own hypocrisy? Your God is power, you have no shame. Your only interest is political gain. You hide your eyes and refuse to listen. You play your game.
Coming up next, America Can We Talk with your host, Debbie-Georgatos.
I've got a feeling that the time.
To America Can We Talk? I'm Debbie-Georgatos. Thank you so very much for tuning in. Today in our show, we're going to have a wonderful guest joining us remotely, Ammon Blair, and he is the Senior Fellow for Texas Public Policy Foundation's Secure and Sovereign Nation Initiative. We'll have Ammon Blair joining us, as well as discussing he'll be discussing, the U.S. House hearing on Sharia versus the Constitution. And then we're going to talk about Mayor in New York City, Mayor Zohran Mamdani, what he had to say recently, and perhaps get Mr. Blair's response to that. I'm doing a segment called Don't Let Texas Be London. I'll tell you more about why I'm saying that. And finally, a bit about the Texas runoffs. Here in the great state of Texas, we have big-time runoff elections coming up. Early voting starts this coming Monday, which is May 18th, and they are very consequential races, so I'll be talking about those. And thank you so much for tuning in to America Can We Talk. So I want to turn to our guest. Our guest joining us, as I mentioned, is not here in studio, unfortunately. He's joining us remotely. He's with the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and I've had him other times. I've also had other experts in the Texas Public Policy Foundation. This is considered one of the premier think tanks, state-based conservative think tanks in the country. Ammon Blair is the senior fellow for their Secure and Sovereign Nation Initiative. He advocates for effective border security, immigration policies that protect the sovereignty and safety of Texas. I've also encountered him numerous times in recent months on various projects I've been working on. He is just an extraordinary researcher, writer, thinker, really articulate. And I gave you a longer story of his background, a few more things. He has over 10 years experience as a U.S. Border Patrol agent, served in the Rio Grande Valley sector. For you people in the great state of Texas, that's a big-time job to have, and other challenging areas in the southwest border. He's also a 20-year-plus Army veteran. He, both as an enlisted soldier and as a commissioned officer. A lot of positions we can talk about there, but I don't want to take much more time for that. I want to ask you to please welcome to the show with me, Ammon Blair. Hi, Ammon.
Hi, ma'am. How are you?
Just great, and I'm liking the cowboy hat. You look like you are a good Texan, which you are. And so I just want to jump in because you're in Washington, D.C. to testify tomorrow at a hearing. This is the House Judiciary Committee on the Constitution and Limited Government. So first, the U.S. Congress, Washington, D.C., the House Judiciary Committee is a hugely consequential committee. And there's a subcommittee on the Constitution and Limited Government, chaired by Texas Republican Chip Roy, who's joined me recently on the show, been on numerous times. He is a chair of that committee. And that committee also, I believe Brandon Gill is on that committee. Brandon Gill spoke recently at our summit, our Texas Freedom Summit. Just very consequential, outspoken, serious conservative. And they're having a hearing titled Sharia Free America, Why Political Islam and Sharia Law Are Incompatible with the U.S. Constitution. So his hearing is tomorrow, and Ammon has made his way to Washington to testify at that hearing tomorrow. So, having done that long introduction, and by the way, if you have any questions, Ammon, I have my Constitution with me. You see that right there? You can ask me something. But on a serious note, I think a lot of Americans don't really know why someone would say that Sharia, Islamic law, is inconsistent with the American Constitution. And you are a scholar extraordinaire on that subject. So I'd love to have you just start and tell our listeners and just what is the reason, the top reasons and the thinking why Sharia is inconsistent with the American Constitution?
Sure. Well, one, thank you for having me. I think everyone probably should look at, every one of your audience should probably look and Google back home because we don't probably have time to digest all of this. But the Holy Land Foundation litigation from the early 2000s, that's going to provide the clearest judicially examined example of why Sharia is incompatible with the Constitution. Prosecutors introduced documentary evidence, financial records, internal memoranda, wiretaps even, meeting transcripts, and overlapping leadership relationships that linked multiple US-based entities, specifically in Texas, to the Palestine Committee support infrastructure that it was established to advance Hamas and their objectives. So the most significant material introduced was the Muslim Brotherhood's 1991 explanatory memorandum. And that memorandum states verbatim, the process of settlement is a civilization jihadist process, with all the word means. The Ikhwan must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands. So that memorandum explicitly defines this work as, like I said before, a civilization jihadist process or a settlement. Tom King through immigration. Immigration is their top priority, so demographic growth and institutional entrenchment that we see like in our education systems, so that Islam and its movement become a part of the homeland it lives in. Based off of all of this, what Sharia is, or the Sunni Islamic legal frameworks of Sharia and jihad provide the doctrinal foundation for, I guess, certain threat systems, because classical Islamic law presents Sharia not merely as private religious ethics, but as Allah's sovereign and unalterable law. So under that framework, Allah is the exclusive lawgiver, and man-made law cannot legally overrule divine law. So therefore, based off of the documents we found, this is a complete conflict between our Constitution and Sharia as governing civil authority, and which our governance, especially specifically inside the United States, rests upon popular sovereignty, meaning it's the sovereignty of the individual that created the states, and it's the sovereignty of the states that created the nation, not vice versa. So we are a republican form of government, and laws enacted through accountable civil institutions. Whereas vice versa, the Sharia itself, it's top down, outside of government, and it's from Allah. So jihad within this legal framework is not merely an internal spiritual struggle. It is also a judicial doctrine with enforceable obligations and defined conditions, like classical legal texts distinguish between collective and individual obligations, including circumstances where jihad becomes personally obligatory when non-Muslim forces enter Muslim lands. For myself, I was a Christian missionary in a Muslim country when I was 19 years old, and there, those who were not Islam, to just give you a personal example of how I have encountered this in my life, had to pay tax because they were a second-class citizen. So it's of these types of ideas that are completely antithetical to the Constitution that we have, and so the constitutional issue is therefore not really a private Muslim belief, worship, or voluntary observance. Those are fully protected. The constitutional issue rises when any institutional system asserts Sharia as a governing civil authority superior to or independent of the Constitution. So then that way, such a system creates a competing source of legal supremacy that cannot coexist with, say, like the Supremacy Clause, the Establishment Clause, the Article 6 prohibition of religious tests, the Due Process and Equal Protections Clause, or just actually the Republican form of government guaranteed by Article 4. And so really that's what Sharia is. It's a governing, political governing institution as opposed to just one of religion.
Ammon, that was such a thorough and wonderful summary, and I want to break it down a little bit because I think it's important for people who, especially if you haven't paid attention to this issue at all, and all of a sudden, at least in Texas, you're probably hearing candidates, elected officials, all sorts of people, talk shows talking about Sharia, and the kind of intuitive reaction of many Americans is, well, okay, you know, I'm Christian, I happen to love the Ten Commandments and the Gospels, and that's what I like, and apparently Islam has Sharia, so why can't they have their thing and we have our thing? That is the common and kind of the intuitive American response because of our First Amendment, our just really robust support for the First Amendment and freedom of religion. And it's just so important to get these points. You summarized it beautifully that I want to make sure I hit on a couple of the big points. One is, what Sharia, where it came from, Sharia is, you can actually buy a book online if you want to order it. Reliance of the Traveler lays out what Sharia is. Sharia comes from the Quran, which is their holy book, the Quran, Quran, and also the teachings and words of Muhammad, the founder of Islam, the creator of Islam. And so that put together is the teachings of Islam, but it's also a structure of government. And I know, for example, I happened to read recently that because Islam teaches that one of the tenets of Islam is inconsistent with American freedom is you're never allowed to leave your religion. If you are Muslim, either born Muslim or convert to Islam, you're never allowed to leave. And the penalty for attempting to do so is death. It's called apostasy. Well, there are 11 countries in the world that still have apostasy as a federal law, as a law that says, yes, in fact, we will punish you as a country if you try to leave Islam. And I think that is a stark reminder, a stark, just example of, they don't think like Western civilization, where of course you can leave your religion. I mean, your fellow members of your religion might be mad, but you can leave. The government isn't going to put you to death. But that's what they do in these countries. One example, so Sharia being a structure of laws, the book is about this thick, by the way, folks, really, really big, covers everything about life. But you also mentioned, I want to go down the path of the history. You talked about with the definition that came from the explanatory memorandum, the civilization, jihad, and all of that. And you said it quickly, I want to be sure. You talked about in there the Holy Land Foundation trial, and how what we learned from that, and I couldn't even write the name down, Palestine Committee, but it ended up being Hamas. Can you say that again? Say what you're saying.
Yeah. So really, the Muslim Brotherhood, the CARE network exemplifies the architecture that you just said, right? Organizations that represent Sharia or trying to enact Sharia inside the United States. And so CARE was named an unindicted co-conspirator in that Holy Land Foundation trial. Everyone can go look that up. All of your audience can go look up the Holy Land Foundation trial. That was in the early 2000s. It is the largest terrorism financing case in U.S. history. And it is centered in Richardson, Texas. So the FBI had wiretaps from the 1993 Philadelphia meeting. And the explanatory memorandum established that CARE originated as part of the Palestine Committee, which was the political and fundraising arm of Hamas in America. So CARE's co-founder, Omar Ammon, stated, Islam isn't in America to be equal to any other faith, but to become dominant. The Quran should be the highest authority in America, and Islam the only accepted religion on earth. So here in the United States, our highest authority, of course, other than God, of course, but is the Constitution of the United States. And so their whole objective is to subvert our current rule of law in our constitutional republic and enact a caliphate or a supreme governance mechanism or institution where Islam itself and Sharia, the Islamic law, is our rule of law, as opposed to the statutes found within our Constitution, and you name it. So these parallel governance concerns therefore arise not from like abstract theory or theology, but from actual operational systems that seek functional autonomy from constitutional civil authority. So institutional mechanisms generate like coercive pressure through reputational intimidation, financial dependency, right? Kind of like financial insurgency that even like the CCP or China does. Community enforced conformity, like a lot of the foreign nationals that have come into the United States typically don't assimilate. They typically stay in their own communities. This is an example of that as well. Informal adjudicatory structures, having their own court systems, or pressure systems that effectively displace access to constitutional safeguards, say like in family law, women's rights, evidentiary transparency, contractual liberty for like property, equal protection and due process. So religious arbitration remains permissible only when participation is genuinely voluntary and outcomes remain subordinate to constitutional protections and judicial review.
Honestly, Ammon, you're just a fount of knowledge on this, and I think for listeners, I really want to have them, we've obviously been on this topic many times on this show, but I think part of, even everything you're explaining, they say, okay, but that's still their thing. They have their countries. They do this. They have whatever it is, 51, 57, 58, whatever it is, number is, of Islamic majority countries that to some degree follow Islam, whether it's the entire, follow Sharia, whether it's the entire law or a portion of the law or only applicable in certain arenas of law. They have their thing. So, but understanding for Americans why it's a threat here is what is really vital at this time. Why the presence of, especially in the great state of Texas, a large number of Islamic immigrants coming to Texas relatively recently and establishing, they tried in our area of Texas, North Texas, to establish a Muslim-only community, the Epic community. But why, what in Islam, I mean, back up and say, Islam has the concept and has a history of 1,400 years of conquest of other non-Islamic countries. Since the time Muhammad was here, it was a conquest ideology. So is it reasonable to you, do you believe we should be looking at what is happening in America and think that we're in the middle of a slow-rolling Islamic conquest effort, not military, obviously, and not violent, but under the auspices of this concept of civilization jihad? Is that what we're seeing in America?
Yes, ma'am, that's what we're seeing from a lot of these Islamic movements, whether that's going to be at the CARE or Muslim Brotherhood or even other terrorist organizations like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the Haqqani Network, Al-Shabaab. You can see that when you look at the diasporas in Minnesota of the Somalis. Look, when you're a foreign national inside the United States, a lot of times what ends up happening is when you don't assimilate and you remain in those communities, and when there's a mass influx of illegal aliens, then a lot of times there's a lack of rule of law in terms of constitutional law. And so there needs to be a governing party, otherwise it'll just be mass chaos. Well, typically that vacuum is sealed with foreign terrorist organizations, or in some cases, countries like the CCP does with secret Chinese police stations. And so in that case, Al-Shabaab was governing and controlling that diaspora through coercion, corruption, and co-option. And that's why we saw through the investigations by the Department of Justice that money was sent, those COVID relief dollars were sent straight to Al-Shabaab to fund their global terrorism efforts. And so the same thing is happening across the entire United States, where they are looking to not assimilate, come into the United States, completely subvert the current rule of law, enact their own rule of law, which typically then ends up happening is once sovereignty is eroded, that is prime opportunity for a foreign terrorist organization or an adversarial nation state to then swoop in and use those foreign nationals as financial assets. We can see that through remittances or as operational tools for whatever illicit or licit production that they want inside the U.S.
Okay, so Ammon, so you're testifying tomorrow because it's on the subject of this subcommittee about whether Sharia is inconsistent with the Constitution. And at the most basic levels, we've talked about a little bit about it, but I just, what I try to convey when I speak about this topic for people is it is a foundational assumption in America, for example, that you can choose your religion, you can change your religion. It's a fundamental assumption because of our structure of our laws that we choose our government and therefore choose our laws. If we have Congress or a state legislature pass some law that we don't like, and we are a big enough policy, you have the voters say, you know what, we're not voting for that person anymore because we don't like this policy, we want to change the policy, and then we elect new government, and that new government makes new law. They respond to the voters. That's how it, not that it happens perfectly, but that's how it has worked and can work. But that kind of mindset that Americans just presume always exists and exists everywhere does not exist in countries where Sharia is the law. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. Your individual rights, look, the inalienable rights that we are so privileged to have in the United States, that almost no country has, to be honest, regardless of what Western hemispheric society or Western society. We're really the only ones who have codified that. We're the only ones who have a constitution, our version of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and have formally declared that they are inalienable from God. And so in regards to that, and that the Constitution was built to protect those rights. Whereas in this case, you typically don't have any individual rights. It is all of what the political entities found within Islamic law dictates what you can and cannot do outside of the protection of the Constitution. And so to give you an example, everyone keeps bringing up the First Amendment, the religious liberty, that this is just a religion and religious liberty. That's fine. But a crime is still a crime, regardless of what religion you are in. Meaning this, your liberty does not give you license to violate someone else's liberty. And so we can take this even further, that your liberty does not give you the license to violate the sovereignty of a political subdivision, which is a sovereign entity, just like a sovereign individual is a sovereign entity. And so whether that's illegal immigration or the subversion of the rule of law, that is in violation of the sovereign's rule of law, and therefore can be adjudicated against. And so that's where this is where it all goes back to, that it can't just be religious practice or religious belief. We can go back to the Brandenburg case with the KKK, where the DOJ lost that case, showing that there was no furtherance from the KKK after that rally into actions or terrorist actions. And so with this, there must be a furtherance of some crime committed, whether that's conspiracy, whether that's a crime committed, or material support to foreign terrorist organizations. It is when that your liberty starts to violate the rights and privileges and liberty of a political subdivision or an individual. And that's what Sharia does. Sharia violates that covenant that was created in the Constitution.
I absolutely love that. That is really the high level pulling back from specifics that are in Sharia, permitted in Islam versus America, the high level distinction between how our countries and our governance is structured. So I'll just give a few examples for everyone. And I want to turn and I want to ask you if you, I don't know how much time you have. I didn't even ask you that if you have time, but I want to play a clip in just a moment by the now New York City Mayor, Zohran Mamdani. But before we get to him, just distinctions that I think on a pragmatic level for people to understand why we can't. I mean, number one, Islam teaches it is a conquest ideology. It says to be a devout Muslim, you must work to convert the world, to bring the world to Islam. That's the whole point of the civilization jihad that the Muslim Brotherhood wrote about. Why they're going to come to America to force eventual conversion or submission, and to end up with an international caliphate. Actually, this is a good question before I get to what I was going to say. So I will tell you, when I first, 20 years ago, I ended up hearing a speech at a luncheon, talking to the speaker afterwards for a long, long time, trying to understand, because this is the first I'd really heard about how dangerous Sharia and Islamic conquest was. At the time, I said, they can't be serious. There can't be a religion in modern times here, and that was, even in 2006, 20 years ago. There can't be a religion that really thinks they're going to eventually conquer the world, force the world to accept their religion, or at least live under their laws, under Sharia, either be killed, convert, or pay the jizya, pay the tax to be allowed to have your own religion. It seems so preposterous, and I think it still does for many people today, to think that they can't really think that that's what they're going to do. But isn't it accurate? That is what the jihadist mindset thinks, the Muslim Brotherhood mindset thinks, is they will eventually bring the world under one caliphate. Isn't that the mission?
Yes,
Ammon?
ma'am, that is the mission, to bring the Islamic law globally, and that their way of life will rule and control and govern the entire nations of people.
Yeah, it is, and they're attempting in Western Europe, throughout many places in the world, but Western Europe is a particular focal point that has been reported in our show and many other shows. So I think it's at least to recognize whether it seems realistic to you or not, it is the goal. So the things that I can say for our pragmatics for our readers, our listeners, you cannot in Islam, I already mentioned you can't change religions, you cannot in any way defame or even question the founder of Islam, the creator of Islam, which is Muhammad, or anything he taught in the Quran, or anything Islam teaches. You can't, as a student, like you might in Christianity, you might say, I wonder why Jesus taught this. I wonder why the Bible says this. You can discuss things. You can pick segments out and have deep discussions. In Islam, it is blasphemy to question in any degree anything Muhammad ever said or did. Again, death penalty. But it's also inequality of the rights of men and women, which we have in America fought for. We have equal rights for all. We lived up to the Declaration's idea of all of us created equal. And so that is these are just fundamental assumptions you make in America and in Western civilization that do not exist and will never exist in a country governed by Islam. Those are the reasons to be fighting it now, as Americans. So, quick thing, I have a quick clip by the New York City mayor, who is a socialist Muslim or Islamic socialist, who made a speech recently about the beauty of hijra or Islamic immigration. So, do we have that clip? Yeah, okay. Let's play that, and then I want to ask you what you think about that.
I think of the freedom from suffering that Buddhism teaches us is only possible if we remove the three poisons of desire, hatred, and ignorance from our daily lives. We need not accept suffering as unchangeable. We need not treat hatred as the natural state. We have the power to set ourselves free. And I consider my own faith, Islam, a religion built upon a narrative of migration. The story of the Hijrah reminds us that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a stranger too, who fled Mecca and was welcomed in Medina. Surah An-Nahl 1642 tells us, as for those who immigrated in the cause of Allah after being persecuted, we will surely bless them with a good home in this world. Or as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Islam began as something strange and will go back to being strange. So glad tidings to the strangers. If faith offers us the moral compass to stand alongside the stranger, government can provide the resources. Let us create.
Okay, so that is Aram Mamdani, and I want to ask you, I'd love to jump in and talk about several things he said. One is, he talked about hijra and the narrative of immigration in Mecca and Medina. So, I love to have you first of all, just talk about hijra, 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 what it is in Islam.
Yeah, so it's immigration, to be honest. It's that movement, exactly what he just said. The mass movement, Hijra means it's the engine of long-term institutional entrenchment, and to build for example, to move into Western society or Western nations, to start building out societies, Islamic centers at the axis of the movement in every city. And so I would actually tell your audience, there's actually a really good study. It's from the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism in Policies 2025 Systemic Analysis documents that, and it documents this exact thing that he's actually talking about, how they continue to employ this immigration-based strategy. It specifically identifies that it's his whole goal is for open borders, so that way he can promote Islamic immigration, identity politics, parallel societies as a core element of there's a 100-year project plan designed to achieve gradual demographic consolidation and then eventual civilization dominance within Western societies. And so once again, I would tell all your audience to read that study. It was just published at the end of 2025 by ISGAP, or the Institute for Studying Global Anti-Semitism and Policy.
Okay, Ammon, if you can text me that link, I'll put it up for our listeners. But I will tell you, I've heard Hijra described by numerous speakers as immigration for the purpose of conquest. And yes, and I think it's really important. It's not about, wouldn't this be wonderful? Like you mentioned, you've been a Christian missionary. I have family, my Lutheran family members have been, they've been missionaries. They've gone to different countries to spread Christianity. But it is by love, sharing, and inviting them to hear about Christianity, but not a conquering or violent or determination to dominate. And it's important to understand when Mayor Mamdani is up there talking about isn't immigration beautiful, he knows this. He's an Iranian, by background, Iranian Muslim. He actually understands the history of Hijra. He knows that in Islam, Hijra means immigration for the purpose of conquest. You show up, you start to establish communities, you start to push Sharia to be accepted in various ways, legitimize and mainstream Islamic conquest concepts, not for the purpose of assimilating, but for the purpose of conquering. And this is what you just heard, even though Mayor Mamdani has a smile on his face, he's all chatty looking, he's telling you, that's right, I am here for conquest. Do you think that's a fair interpretation, Ammon?
Yeah, 100%. And I would tell all your audience to, if they don't know, look at the history of Muhammad. Go read about it. You can read like the Politically Incorrect Guide for Islam by Robert Spencer. That's a really good read. And but if you look at that, you'll see that what happened in Medina, he conquered it. It was by the sword, and that's why, like, if you read the Quran, you'll see that in the very beginning, it's peaceful, right? It's a lot more peaceful text, but in the very end, it's a lot more warlike. And anything that contradicts within the Quran, it is the later statements or what was written at the end that supersedes what was written before. And so you'll see that this immigration, therefore, is a terms, like you said, of conquest. But many people don't see that. They'll just take his statement and see that it is of love, because he's saying if you don't allow immigration, then it is of hate, xenophobic. You can even see Christians doing the same thing, saying that Jesus is a refugee. And it's so all he is doing is he's trying to use your values, whether that's your Judeo-Christian values or whatnot, to think that migration is a global human right, and that by not allowing that human right into the U.S., then you are going against your own Christian values. It's creating a hypocrisy cost, making you look like a hypocrite if you don't allow it. And so that's why these terms and this rhetoric is used by such as hate, and everything else like that stands against immigration enforcement. It is so that he can cover the actual real reason of what these Islamic movements are seeking to gain, and that is complete control, not only of the diasporas, which they are trying to control over, but the governance from the local level all the way to the top.
Yeah, governance is domination over everyone. So the other thing that I want to mention, then I'll finally let you go, because I'm so glad. I know I contacted you last minute. I was happy you were available, but part of what people have observed in America is that we have a very lovely, robust immigration. Everyone's always saying, oh, we're a land of immigrants. Everyone's family came from somewhere. And it is true that most American citizens today are descendants of people who came to America. They're not majority descendants of people who are Native Americans. But the purpose of coming to America in virtually every other culture there has been is assimilation. It is to come to become part of America, to embrace our system of government, embrace our economy, embrace just the ideas of the Constitution. They come for opportunity, protection, freedom. Islam never, ever, ever, ever comes for the purpose of assimilating and joining a culture. Islam comes for the purpose of conquering, of forcing their culture and Sharia on you. Again, I have to go back. Ammon, you're the expert. I mean, I've been reading about this a lot, but you're the one who knows so much about it. So is that accurate to say?
Yes, I would also tell everyone to go read. My mom just became a citizen this last year. And
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. And I would tell everyone to go and read the oath to become a citizen. And you'll see in there the allegiance that one must subscribe to the Constitution in order to become a citizen of the United States, and to forego anything that contradicts the constitutional republic, to the point where it even states that you are willing to fight for this country if it ever comes to that point, take up arms against the enemies, and so. That is the difference. I typically tell everyone to go and see that oath of office. I mean, not oath of office, but the oath of citizenship, to truly see where we are at. And in terms of immigration enforcement, all around, look, we've already created a parallel immigration system. It wasn't just under the Biden administration. Many Republican presidents before him also did the same thing as they were carving out whether that's temporary protected status, amnesty in the 80s, and you name it. They were carving out ways and means for the illegal immigration here into the United States. And what that did is it slowly eroded the idea that there must come with that an allegiance tied to the country itself. And so now we have two separate parallel programs to come into the United States. And the one created that one from allegiance, that even when Texas became a republic, also had that very same concept and idea within the Texas Constitution of allegiance itself. But once we get that away, then what other organizations, Islamic movements, cartels, Mexican cartels, CCP, can then subvert that allegiance and then bring it onto themselves. And really that's what we're seeing now across the United States. And it's not even to include Islamic movements. It's all the other diasporas that we have now allowed inside the United States to occupy us. We are completely occupied now by our adversarial nation states, and every single one of our adversaries, both nation state and not.
Okay, so this is my last question, but so this sounds like a need for amending the federal immigration laws, because this is the beauty of our democratic republic. You can elect new people, get new laws. The idea of redefining America, especially in this era of America 250, celebrating our identity as a country, whatever needs to change in federal laws that dissipates a sense of citizenship and assimilation and convicted commitment to America's founding ideas, somehow we kind of got to uproot that. That's probably a topic for another show. But I love the idea of getting our immigration laws in line so that we're really supporting what our founders created, which was a country rooted in these very beautiful ideas of the Declaration, which is the 250th anniversary, by the way, is of the Declaration of Independence, this July 4th. And re-looking at those ideas are really vital. So, Ammon, Blair, I could talk to you all day. I want to thank you for taking time to come on today. Thank you so very much, and I'll be back to ask you on again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for having me.
Great to see you, sir. Okay, so folks, I want to try to do a bunch of things in the short remaining time today. One is to talk about what this hearing is that's going on in Washington tomorrow. This is part of this at the federal government, they have a group that is called the Sharia Free America Caucus, and it was created by Congressman Chip Roy and my congressman, Keith Self, and then now it's got, I think it's 60 members. It doesn't have every Republican member of the House, but has a lot of them. And they're really trying to flesh out, by having hearings like tomorrow, Ammon Blair is going to testify, and Amy Meck is going to testify. And I've mentioned her, she's been on the show, I've mentioned her before, AMY-MEK. If you want to follow what's happening in America, in this, we are under conquest from Islam. And this is Islamic conquest unfolding right before our very eyes. She is one of the most extraordinary researchers. She has people bring information to her. Follow her on X at Amy, M-E-K, and go to her website, RARE, R-A-I-R, rarefoundation.com. She's got new stories, a lot of them in Texas, I'm sorry to report, but new stories, new discoveries every day. We really are under assault, and having a mayor like Zohran Mamdani. He is a socialist, bad enough. He's also Iranian by descent, so he is a Shia socialist, a Shia Islamist, a whole set of very dangerous doctrines they embrace. But this is a form of conquest. I would tell you that a Christian, Norwegian Lutheran from Minnesota would not get elected mayor of any town in the majority of Muslim majority countries. Wouldn't happen because it wouldn't allow it, and because Islam does not tolerate anything except Islam. And so somehow America has become, in this land of tolerance and acceptance, we have failed to see that we're under attack, and that is how serious it is. That's part of what the hearing is about tomorrow. And I want to just talk about, too, the way if Sharia becomes normalized, legitimized, even if it doesn't replace our Constitution and our laws. By the way, I could spend the rest of the show playing videos for you, actual imams in America talking about, yes, of course we intend to replace American law with Sharia. Yes, of course we intend to take down the Constitution and the American structure of government and put Sharia in place. This is not idle. This is not a few random crazies. This is the goal of the Muslim Brotherhood, the goal of CARE, the goal of the Islamist movement in America. So that's happening. I want to just talk for just a second about what happens when Sharia concepts become normalized and legitimized. Because in Muslim-majority countries, especially if the government embraces Sharia, the whole culture lives by that, functions by that, thinks like that. So I want to ask you if you could put up the picture from exhibit number 2. We have a picture of a woman. This is this lady, her name, she happens to be a Pakistani Christian, so she lives in Pakistan, one of the most dark, repressive, evil regimes on the planet in terms of forcing Sharia on everyone. This sweet lady, her name was, she's a Pakistani Christian, her name is Asia Bibi. She was arrested 8 years ago. No, I'm sorry. She spent 8 years on death row, 8 years on death row in Pakistan for the crime of blasphemy, which what they meant by that, blasphemy, was she was a laborer working in the fields with her Muslim co-workers, but she's a Christian. She's working in the fields. It's hot as daylight out there. It's terribly hot. So she went over to a well to try to get some water, and she found an old metal cup by the well, a metal cup, put water and drank out of it. She's hot, working in the fields. She's arrested because she drank out of a cup owned by a Muslim. That was considered blasphemy. And she not only was arrested, she was prosecuted, convicted, and sentenced to death. And what I'm telling you, this did not happen 500 years ago. This happened in our lifetime. This happened in the 2000s. I think it was like early 2010. This is a woman who was on death row for drinking water out of a metal cup that was owned by a Muslim because she's a Christian. And why I'm telling you this story is, this is just one of thousands and thousands of stories. I'm trying to make the point, Islamic mindset, Sharia mindset, corrupts human morality, corrupts human decency, corrupts your thinking to the point that seemed like a really logical thing to do, to arrest her, to be prosecuted, to have the system convict you, to put her on death row, only because there was so much international pressure on the country of Pakistan, who which attempts to play in the international field. They actually. Actually, one more thing. She was acquitted in 2018 due to international pressure, so she got out in 2018. But listen to this. A local poll, they did a poll in Pakistan. 10 million Pakistanis said they would personally kill her if given the chance. Not just that they disagree that the government should carry out the death penalty, but they're saying they're so invested in this lunacy, this tyrannical Sharia, that they would say, yeah, if I ever got a hold of her, if she's released, I would kill her. That's the mindset. That's the corruption of the human nature that is Islam, and it is Sharia. And I understand it's hard for people in America listening to this think, well, that can't really. It's true. That woman is one good example. So I want to. I have a very quick clip. Just if you think that these people so Zohran Mamdani, others, there's a woman who was an intern from Mamdani. This is clip 4. And do you have clip 4 to play? Okay, just listen to how she's talking. She is hired by now the guy who's mayor of New York City. Basically, what she's saying is, of course we're here in America for holy war. Of course we intend to take you down. Let's play her clip.
And the true believer knows that none of this is in vain, that this is all jihad, that this is all ibadah, and that this is all counted for by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the conversation of doxing, the conversation of getting arrested and suspended, I think it's time for Muslims to start to say, all right, so what? Do what you want. I'm gonna do what I gotta do, because it's about time to do that. And I know everybody has their own families and has an education and everything. It's just a question. We don't want to get doxxed, and we don't want to get suspended, and we don't want to get arrested. How gangsta are you? That's just my question. How much are you willing to do it? And I know everyone has their own risk levels, but at the end of the day, that's a question to ask ourselves. How committed am I to this? To what extent of my personal material gains am I willing to sacrifice for this bigger noble cause? And subhanAllah, I truly believe that when your heart is in the right place, if you get suspended, if you get doxxed, because it's bound to happen when you're doing a righteous cause and when you're doing something for the sake of Allah here in the West, it will never ever be in vain. And the true believer does not fear that, because the true believer knows that the akhirah is a promise.
Okay, so if you think she was hard to follow, here's her summary. She's talking to Muslims in America, saying, what in the world are you waiting for? Go for it. This is jihad. Take America down. Stop worrying about your kids and your family and, if they dox you. She's encouraging the civilization jihad that Muslim Brotherhood promised are bringing to America. She was an intern for the mayor, and now mayor of New York City, who's trying to talk in sweet, inviting terms about the hijra. Isn't that so nice? We're a religion of immigration. Again, hijra is immigration for the purpose of conquest. It's always for the purpose of conquest. Never to assimilate, never to blend, never to share, never to learn from other cultures, always conquest. And that's the kind of person he was willing to hire as an intern. I'll show you one more picture, and this is our clip 5. Just I'll show you the picture of, this is the assemblage, if you have that, the assemblage of, okay, you can turn the sound off. I can't stand it. You can play it with no sound. This is the government of the City of London. For those listening, women all have on hijabs. Men are obviously all or nearly all Arabic, nearly all Muslim. So you have the City of London. This is just a panning of their looks, all in hijabs, and they're covered in head to toe. This is the government of the City of London. And the reason I'm telling you that is London responded to this massive Islamic immigration. The whole country of UK responded by saying, well, sure, we can accommodate Islam when you have this massive influx of Islamic immigrants into UK, mostly forced by the European Union, who were trying to force member countries to accept these immigrants. So the people came in, these people adherent to Islam, right after arrival, talk to the government UK, say, look, you know, we have Sharia, you have your British law, let us have our law, you can have yours. And UK said, okay, that sounds good. So they allowed Sharia courts to be instituted all over the UK, 92 of them now, I think the number is. So they're dispensing law under barbaric, tyrannical Sharia that does not recognize equal rights, does not recognize freedom, and in England, at least, people, if they are not afraid of how their fellow Muslims will react, the people can appeal, but who's going to do that? You live in the Islamic community, you went to the Sharia court, they said, oh, you're getting a divorce? Woman, you get no money, no kids, no home, out. That's what happens in Sharia divorce. And these women have nowhere to go. And I'm getting at the point, London is a Western European city. London was a fun place to visit, and still can be, I guess. I don't know. I haven't been there a long time. But they allowed their country to be overrun to the point that what you just saw is a picture of the government of London, nearly all Islamic. And if all those people believe in Sharia, believe in Islamic law, of course it shapes how they view everything. How they view everything. And so this is why when people start to say in America, not too sure we should continue to have large immigration from countries where people are adherent to Sharia, people who believe in Sharia. It's one of Chip Roy's points he keeps making over and over is, why do we have immigration, people coming to America who are Sharia compliant, Sharia submissive, who want Sharia here? The answer is, if you want to live under Sharia, you have something like 51 to 57 countries in the world. Go live there, not in America. We can't, and we don't want to have Texas become London, so we're stepping up sooner, trying to stop this. So one other thing I want to show you is I emailed the very wonderful Mackenzie, my producer, something I wanted to show you. This is, I do a lot of speeches in this topic. This is one slide I wanted to show you because understanding this changes a lot. This slide is essentially what historians have recorded over centuries and centuries of studying Islamic immigration. This is what happens. And for those of you can't see what I'm saying, I'll quickly tell you, this is, historians have embraced this over and over. There are three phases of Muslim immigration. Phase one, very few in number. They always act oppressed. They play the victim. They claim Islamophobia. They're tolerant of others because they're not in charge yet. Phase two, a larger minority. They're indignant. They are threatening. They're demanding Sharia law. They're intolerant of infidels. That's kind of where Texas is. Well, this is an actual, I want to leave that slide up. I want to make this point. Throughout history, and for 1,400 years since Islam was formed, it has always been a conquering ideology. It has never been about assimilating, having shared views, shared values, respect for other religions. It's always been a conquering ideology. That's what Sharia teaches. So you can put it back up so it's hard to see. Okay. And then phase three, when they have a clear majority, they are dominant, they're militant, they enforce strict Sharia law, and you end up with subduing all infidels. For 1,400 years, the pattern of Islamic conquest has not changed. And someone added in the bottom of that slide, and I'll say this point now, moderate Muslims are irrelevant. Okay, come back to me. Yes, there are moderate Muslims in this world who do not engage in conquest, who do not engage in civilization jihad. But that doesn't change the fact that what we're talking about today, what Ammon Blair was telling you about, what you're witnessing, what we were talking about, it is the core of Islam. It's the core of Sharia. It's what Sharia teaches, and Sharia cannot be changed. It was put in place by the Quran and books about Muhammad's life written over 1,000 years ago, and absolutely a core term of Sharia is it can never, 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 never be changed. You can never change anything about it. So that's where we are. I want to raise all that to say that there's a race coming up in Texas. There are runoffs coming up in Texas. So we have in Texas, we have a May 26th is actually our runoff. We have 3 huge runoffs in Texas, May 26th. But early voting starts next Monday, which is May 18th. And early voting happens in 3 runoffs I'm going to mention. One is the U.S. Senate, and that race has the incumbent Senator John Cornyn, been there a long time, and he's being challenged by the now sitting Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton. I'm a member of the Republican National Committee. I'm serving the RNC, representing Texas. I don't endorse in many races, but I have endorsed in this race because I think that we need to have, because I strongly believe in term limits for one thing, and I think that Ken Paxton, as our Attorney General, has been the most extraordinary Attorney General in the country, has led on all sorts of issues, including this issue, and he is running for this to be the Republican nominee in the fall to represent Texas in the United States Senate. So I have endorsed in that race. The only thing I'll say, I think both candidates now are making statements about Sharia and Islam and worried about the Islamization of Texas, but that wasn't happening all along. There's plenty of evidence of John Cornyn having been very friendly toward Islamic aggression, not recognizing the danger until now. Ken Paxton's been extraordinary, our Attorney General and candidate for Senate, extraordinary. Second race I want to mention very quickly is a Railroad Commission race, and that is it has nothing to do with railroads. It's an unusual name in Texas. It has to do with energy, our energy policy. But there's a gentleman running named Beau French, and Beau French is running to unseat the incumbent member of the Railroad Commission, who is Jim Wright, I think his first name, Jim Wright. And again, those two, it's a huge contrast. Beau French understands what is happening with Islamic takeover of Texas. He sees it, he speaks about it, he's been bold and outspoken, and Jim Wright has not. In fact, recently made a statement that his Christian faith doesn't allow him basically to make statements about other faiths. And I'm sorry, if you cannot, I understand we have freedom of religion, and I don't condemn every Muslim, but I do understand enough about Sharia, which is the core of Islam, to say you're not being a good Christian and not being a good protector of America if you cannot condemn what Sharia would do to your fellow neighbors, your fellow Americans. If you can't see your way to criticizing Sharia, you have no business running in a position and that the energy field, by the way, has plenty of challenges all by itself that Beau French is ready to handle. But being in a position of having both a bully pulpit and having that position, he's in a position to help defend Texas against this Islamic conquest. Third one, and I want to mention because we were mentioning a moment ago, there is an attorney general race in this case, in this state. So Ken Paxton, current AG, running for Senate. So we're down to a runoff in the Texas attorney general race, and it's a primary runoff. So we have 2 not incumbents. One is a former state senator, Mays Middleton, and he's in this runoff, and the other one is Congressman Chip Roy. And Chip Roy has been speaking up on this issue in Congress and I mean in articulate, passionate, really forceful ways. We have a very quick clip. So last week, I do, for my, a week ago today actually, I have a first Tuesday of the month statewide call, and so people get on from all over the state, Republicans, it's a grassroots Republican call, and on that call, I got onto that call both Congressman Chip Roy and Amy Meck. And again, if you don't follow Amy Meck, I encourage you to do that. Amy Meck is extraordinary in her being outspoken about the danger Texas is under with respect to radical Islam. So Amy Meck got on that call, and I believe we have a clip, which do you have the clip provision? You do. Okay. So this, you can't see, it was a call, so you can't see, so we just have a little, ad meme up there to show you, but this is Amy Meck talking about the Texas Attorney General race.
I chose to focus on Texas, not just because I believe Texas is ground zero, and if Texas falls, America is going to fall, but because you also have the greatest patriots and the greatest grassroots organizations and the greatest, just conservatives in your state who care so deeply about this. And the reason why we were able, for the first time after all of these years, to get movement was because people saw what was going on. They felt something was wrong. We delivered information. They took that and they moved to action. Look at the movement Debbie's been able to, work on and create. Look at how many people have now descended on Texas, whether it's Steve Bannon talking about, whether it's you've got media all across your state. So I look at you guys as, first off, you are ground zero, and you have the Muslim Brotherhood heads operating out of your state. So do other red states like Florida. But now I feel like it's the education, it's the getting used to speaking about this issue. The fact that you have a leader, Chip Roy, saying what he's saying, the country's listening. People's conversations are shifting. I'm hearing people I have friends all across the country that are saying to me, did you see what Chip Roy said? Did you see what Keith Self just said? So I think that these two gentlemen and the Sharia Free Caucus have been a game changer. I think having an attorney general that is willing to talk about these things, how he's speaking about it, is a game changer. And it's you guys, it's the grassroots, it's the being able to, you just did an amazing job showing up to the Board of Ed and what just took place there. And again, we built out a report. We showed you it wasn't just Islam. We showed you how Islam cannot spread without the help of the left. So everywhere they go, we have to turn into activists there the way they are, because they're incredible at organizing. Most kids that graduate from college don't say, I'm a community organizer, who are conservatives. That is a very highly esteemed position on the left. We have to get activated. And
Okay, the reason I want to play that is I mentioned the Railroad Commission race, I mentioned the U.S. Senate race, I mentioned the Attorney General race. These races are all very consequential, not just for Texas, but for America. And given what I've tried to relay on today's show, as well as previous shows in my Texas Freedom Summit, that was April 25th, it was a great summit. I'm sorry if you didn't get to go, it was a great summit. But in many other contexts and speeches I do, is I'm trying to raise the alarm bell that the conquest of America that is underway by Islamic conquest, by those who would like to impose a caliphate, like to push Sharia law, they're way, way down the path. They have the mayor. They have the mayor's role in the biggest city in this country. The most important financial center in America is now controlled by Islam. That's how we have to see it. It's not by a man who happens to be Muslim. It's controlled by Islam. And he's out there in many, many ways pushing Islam. So what I'm trying to say is this is a time for serious patriots, in my view, to look at the races, look at the seats you have to choose, and decide that this is a top priority. This issue of who is going to stand up, defend America, freedom, the Constitution, the rule of law, the American Judeo-Christian society, and reject Sharia, Islamic law, Islamic conquest, is going to push back on it. Not wait till it tiptoes in more and more and more. We have a bigger problem, but push back now. Push back in every conceivable way. And that's why I've been so strong in these races I've been involved in and speaking in. It's so important to see this is a top issue. It's like that whole story I used to say about the house is on fire, you're sitting at the kitchen table, and, yes, the house is on fire, but, mom wants to discuss who didn't make their bed in the morning, and dad's saying, heck, the house is on fire, everybody get up, I'm going to get the fire, answer the urgent call. The urgent call for Americans, especially Texans, is to recognize, expose, recognize, and in every possible way, reject this Islamic conquest of America. That's the goal. And so every vote you take in this upcoming, in Texas and throughout this year, recognize that is the threat, and your job as a patriot, as a lover of freedom and the Constitution of America, is to reject Sharia, reject this Islamic conquest, stand up for America. Last thing will take me exactly 2 seconds, but I want to tell you something. Someone put into Grok, or one of those kind of things, the basic thing, they put in these prompts. If you had to design a map, an electoral map for the Electoral College, because everyone's fussing about the Supreme Court decisions, but here's a question for Grok. Put in apportion seats by population, so basically 761,000 people in every district. Draw compact contiguous districts, no odd shapes, no partisan considerations, no racial considerations. Draw districts as closely as possible to what America's founders envisioned when they wrote and ratified the Constitution. Here is the result. Look at this map. This is number 6. This is how the map of the Electoral College would look. Overwhelmingly red. You would have an Electoral College 280 Republican seats and 156 Democrat seats. I'm sorry, it's not electoral, it is U.S. Congress. And I'm getting at the point, these are congressional districts. If you didn't have Democrats engaging in election fraud, fighting voter ID, allowing massive influx over the southern border, trying to legalize illegal aliens to vote. If you didn't have all the shenanigans, deception, dishonesty out of the Democrat Party, you would have a Congress made up of 280 Republicans, 156 Democrats, so don't stop fighting on the issue of election integrity. Okay, friends, I am way past time to wrap up this show. I first want to thank Mackenzie Bowen, my amazing producer, who's probably wondering when I'm going to stop talking, but pretty soon. I want to thank her for this, just the opportunity to do this show. Thank Real News PR, Real News Communication Network. I want to thank our guest, Ammon Blair, today. I'm so glad he was available. And I thank you, our listener, for tuning in. I do this show, America Can We Talk. By the way, you can find it on X at Debbie Can We Talk, DEBBIE at Debbie Can We Talk. Please follow me there. You can find us on Rumble, Debbie America Can We Talk, and my website is americacanwetalk.org or .com. Find us all those places, and on Substack. We have a great Substack, America Can We Talk. Find us all those places. Read, follow, share, be involved in the American political conversation to save this country. I'm Debbie Georgatos. My show is America Can We Talk. And I do this show to speak truth about America because America matters. And I will talk to you next time.
Like a crashing wave. Can you hear us now?
America Can We Talk? Truth about America.
Can you